You ever stop and think about how something from clear across the world ended up in your hands? I mean, today we can answer that with just a few clicks. But what about 2,000 years ago? Well, the answer then involved treacherous seas, dangerous deserts, and this incredible web of connections that didn't just move goods, but actually shaped entire civilizations. So today we're going to follow that thread and see just how connected the ancient world really was. It's way more than you might think.
And our whole journey, it doesn't start with some grand answer. Nope, it starts with a question. Just a simple, powerful moment of curiosity that ends up unraveling this entire world of trade, power, and belief.
So where do we begin? Not in a king's court, not on some famous battlefield. We're starting in a place that I think we can all recognize, a noisy, bustling local market. So I want you to meet Jagini. She's at her village fair, and she is just surrounded by all these wonders. She sees these shiny steel pots, bright plastic buckets, even these incredible clockwork toys, all stuff that came from the big city. The men who sold them, they'd show up on buses and trucks and then just pack up and leave at the end of the day. And that got her wondering, why are they always on the move? Such a simple question from a curious kid, right? Her mom explained that they were traders, people who buy things where they're made and then sell them somewhere else. And that simple answer, right there, that is the key that unlocks our entire story. It's the beginning of a thread that's going to stretch across continents. So, okay, let's follow that thread. Let's take a look at who these people on the move really were and the incredible highways they traveled. And I'm not talking about asphalt and concrete, but highways of ocean currents and winding desert paths. Take South India, for example. For the ancient world, it was basically a treasure chest. It was famous for its gold, all kinds of spices, and beautiful, precious stones. But out of all these things, one of them was more valuable than pretty much all the rest. Black gold. That's what the Romans called pepper. Just think about that for a second. This simple spice that we use every day was so sought after in the Roman Empire that it earned the nickname black gold. It wasn't just for flavor, no way. It was an absolute luxury, a status symbol, and the source of just immense wealth. So how do we know this isn't all just a good story? Well, archaeologists have literally found troves of Roman gold coins all across South India. So this isn't a guess, right? This is hard, physical proof of a booming trade relationship between two very distant corners of the world. And this just speaks to the absolute genius of these ancient traders. They didn't just sail out into the blue and hope for the best. These guys were master navigators. They understood and they harnessed the monsoon winds to cross huge open seas like the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal way, way faster. And they built these strong, sturdy ships that were designed specifically for these long, punishing journeys. And of course, you can't talk about ancient trade without mentioning the most legendary highway of them all, the Silk Route. Now, this wasn't one single road. It was a whole network of dangerous paths that wound through mountains and deserts, all to bring that rich, glossy silk from China, a fabric so prized that wearing it became the absolute height of fashion for the rich and powerful in Rome. Okay, so whenever you have that much wealth moving around, something else is pretty much guaranteed to follow: power. Controlling these trade routes became the ultimate prize for ambitious kings and chiefs, who all figured out how to turn that flow of goods into their own personal kingdoms. Down in South India, chiefs known as the Moovindar had this simple but honestly brilliant playbook. First, you control the coasts and the fertile river valleys. Those are the entry and exit points for all the trade. Second, instead of collecting regular taxes, you just demand gifts and tribute. And third, you take that wealth and you distribute it to your supporters, your family, your soldiers, even poets to make sure they stay loyal. See, their kingdoms were literally built on the flow of trade. Meanwhile, up along the Silk Road, a whole other power was on the rise, the Kushanas. Around 2,000 years ago, they controlled this huge area covering Central Asia and Northwest India. This basically put them in the perfect spot to act as the powerful gatekeepers of this critical trade artery, and you better believe they got rich from all the taxes and tribute they collected. The Kushanas also did something incredibly smart. They were among the very first rulers in the subcontinent to issue gold coins. Now, this was a total game changer. It helped formalize and just simplify transactions for traders all along the Silk Route, which made commerce way smoother and, of course, stamped Kushana authority all over. So you have these coins and these routes, and they created a physical network connecting empires. But what's truly fascinating, what's really mind-blowing, is that this physical network became a pipeline for something you couldn't even touch. Because the most important thing moving along these routes, well, it wasn't something you could hold in your hand. And this, right here, this is the real climax of our story. Along these very same paths, carried in the minds of travelers and in the scrolls they protected with their lives, were the ideas, the philosophies, and the religions that would go on to shape the world for thousands of years. The perfect examples are the Chinese Buddhist pilgrims, guys like Faxian and Chuanzong. They weren't traveling for riches, they were on a quest for knowledge. They journeyed all the way to India, the birthplace of Buddhism, to visit holy sites and collect sacred texts. And a lot of the time, they traveled right alongside the merchant caravans, sharing the same roads and facing the exact same dangers.
And as these ideas traveled, they changed, they evolved. For instance, a new form of Buddhism called Mahayana Buddhism developed. So check this out. Early on, the Buddha was only represented by signs, like the peepal tree he meditated under, which you see on the left. But with Mahayana Buddhism, artists actually started creating statues of the Buddha in human form, like the one on the right. This was a massive shift. It made the faith so much more visual and personal.
Now, a core idea of this new form was the bodhisattva. These were people who had attained enlightenment, but then chose to stay in the world out of compassion, just to teach and help other people. This idea of selfless help, wow, it became incredibly popular. It spread like wildfire across Central Asia, China, and way, way beyond. And these journeys were anything but easy. I mean, they were absolutely terrifying. The pilgrim Faxian wrote this after surviving a storm at sea that lasted for 13 straight days. The merchants on his ship were throwing their cargo overboard just to keep from sinking. Faxian, he threw away his own few belongings, but he clung desperately to his books and the statues of the Buddha he had collected. That's just how precious these ideas were to him. And you know, Buddhism wasn't the only big idea on the move. Within Hinduism, a new path of devotion called bhakti started to emerge. And this idea was revolutionary. It proposed a direct, personal, loving relationship with a god, like Shiva or Vishnu. And crucially, this path was open to anyone, rich or poor, man or woman. It didn't matter what caste you were. It was an idea of profound spiritual equality. So, when we start to put all of these pieces together, the traders, the kings, and the pilgrims, a really clear picture starts to emerge. It's this powerful chain reaction, isn't it? The simple desire for goods like spices and silk created these vast networks. The wealth that flowed along those networks allowed powerful kingdoms to rise. And then, those exact same networks became the superhighways for the beliefs and philosophies that fundamentally shaped societies all across Asia and Europe. So from a little girl's simple question in a market, we've traced this incredible web that connected the entire ancient world. It was all driven by desire, for wealth, for power, and for wisdom. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our own hyper-connected age, what are the powerful forces that are moving us across the globe? What is our silk, our spices, our salvation?